So I think there's a difference between tolerance and acceptance. I think the Dutch tolerate. I think Dutch society tolerates a lot of things. There's a difference between tolerating and welcoming people into society and actual acceptance. So my name's Janneke. I live here in Amsterdam. I live specifically in Amsterdam North, which some people say is not really part of Amsterdam, but they're just not as cool. I moved here 3 years ago. I moved here from the US and specifically Texas. And I moved here to study, and with the hope that I would get to stay here long term, but it hasn't really worked out that way. And it's been an interesting experience finding out why and learning more about myself along the way. I chose to come to the Netherlands because my mother is Dutch, my father is American, my mother is Dutch. I grew up in both cultures. I spent every summer here as a kid, so I've always felt very Dutch, and I felt too foreign to really be American. But now that I'm here, I feel too American to really be Dutch. And it's interesting being stuck in that middle and being stuck not really belonging in any particular culture or any particular place. I think so. It's interesting because, like, when you look, I don't dress like other Dutch people. Like, you can see that obviously. And so when I think people first see me, they assume I'm foreign, which is true. Then when I speak and I speak Dutch without an accent, they can hear it and they say, "Oh, okay, well, I guess I wasn't mistaken per se, but there's something weird going on." Lots of people ask me after they look at me and they hear my Dutch and they hear my name, they ask me, "Okay, but where are you actually from?" And there's always something a little demeaning about that because you're right. I wasn't born here. This isn't where I grew up, but it's still a very real part of me. Like, I have a Dutch passport. I'm Dutch. I'm as Dutch as anybody else. I just look a little different. What I find is that there's a lot of expectations that I know how Dutch culture works when I don't. As an example, so I'm in my 30s, which again feels a little old to have gone back to school and all of that. But for an American, that's perfectly reasonable. People go back to school all the time. The expectation is that I would be working at least a full-time job, that I would have multiple clubs on the side, or like going to sports club or going to a music club or any of those sorts of things, that I would be looking at starting a family, that I am of an age where still learning how to be and who I am is not acceptable anymore. I'm supposed to have that figured out and I'm supposed to be on the path for the rest of my life. And so, not being on that, I get met with confusion, I get met with a little bit of derision, and essentially sort of treated like there's something wrong with me, which doesn't feel right, and that doesn't feel good. Um, and it's also, again, that sense that I might be a little bit of a lost cause. So in the Netherlands, there's a phrase. It's "doe normaal," and when I was a kid, I heard this phrase all the time. Everybody tells you to "doe normaal," "doe normaal," want normaal is gek genoeg. Um, be normal because normal is crazy enough. That idea that this is a this is a consensus culture, that things come together, that things are consensed upon, because within that consensus you have the workings of a functional society. There's the understanding that everybody's going to work together to make something that is neutral. For someone like me, who is not conforming within the society's norms, there's a little bit of an idea that there's something fundamentally wrong, that I am not doing normal. Um, and with that comes a certain degree of, again, ostracization and exclusion, because if you're not willing to do normal and to play down and to go down the path that is set out in front of you, you are fundamentally going against this consensus culture and going against this idea of we're all in this together. Contrast that with a place like the United States, where I think maybe as a result of it being a mixing pot, maybe just there's so many people coming together, there is not really one expectation of how to live. There's certain societal expectations, sure, but there's not an expectation of this is the path your life will take with no excuse for deviation unless there's something fundamentally wrong with you. There's more room and acceptance for variation rather than here where there's really not. I like thinking about the history of the place. So again, that's where the king comes out and he'll address people from time to time. This is a royal palace. It started as a city hall, but then Louis Napoleon wanted it as his palace, and now it's still a palace. You have a monument to World War II over there. This is a place that feels in many ways like the heart of the Netherlands. Even though I'm sure there are many Dutch people who would object to me calling it that, it's interesting, and it feels nice to be in a place that lies at the heart of everything. And it makes you feel like you're a part of everything as well. That you get to be part of this narrative and you get to be part of this story. One thing that I think about here is the fact that until the 60s, the Protestant-Catholic divide in the Netherlands was one of the defining features of Dutch society. It was something called pillarization, where society was very much divided into the Protestant section of society and the Catholic section of society, and never the two would mix. And I think in some ways the legacy of that is still very much part of Dutch culture and Dutch society, where yes, there's a whole bunch of different people all together, but they don't mix and they don't come together as one. They are different pillars and different factions within society. And so you have that acceptance and willingness to be together, but not the acceptance of the other as part of the whole. I'm also autistic, which really doesn't help anything. This is an extrovert's culture. Like, this is an extroverted culture where it's an extroverted introvert culture, where on the one hand everything centers around this gezelligness and this gezellige atmosphere and doing certain things together and making sure you have a social structure planned, but at the same time your own life is your own life, and you very, very rarely invite people into that. So for instance, getting invited over to somebody's place for dinner is a whole hullabaloo rather than just, hey, I'm having dinner, why don't you come over for dinner as well? Things are scripted, things are structured, but at the same time, they are very scripted and structured in an extroverted, outgoing way that's required. And so for somebody who is introverted, or for somebody who doesn't necessarily find joy or pleasure in how these social events are structured, it's really difficult to get anywhere, and it's really difficult to make any headway with the few connections you do manage to make. Because why would that person spend time with you when they have friends who are willing to go out to the pub with them anyway? I think Americans are a bit more, they're chattier people, so there's a lot more, I think, free flow of conversation and free flow of thoughts than there is with not just Dutch people, but a lot of European cultures. I think we're a little notorious for it, where we just keep talking, even when we've run out of things to say. The stereotype I like to think of is that we're so scared of silence that we fill it with any word we can think of. And while that's not necessarily true of me, I think it is a general way to think about what the difference between the two is, where, again, there's that desire to just chat, and there's that desire for small talk, even if there's nothing meaningful to say. That said, I was amused by the fact that they have an entire section that's just cat books, which is very funny. Yeah, so yeah, there comes a point at which you do just kind of give up, where you recognize, okay, I don't fit here. I am on the one hand too American to fit in here because the way I'm approaching things, the way I speak, the way I consider things is deeply American, but I'm also not great at small talk, not great at chit chat, not great at any of that, but that's fundamental to the US system of interaction. But at the same time, I don't fit in the Netherlands either. I don't fit in the box that's required of me here. I am not I don't have it all figured out in my 30s. I am happy to immigrate. I am happy to embrace things from cultures that aren't my own. I am happy to accept others rather than just tolerate others. Um, and again, all of that sounds very harsh, but it's become clearer, and I don't fit here either. I'm gonna grab this one. All right. I collect them, so. All right, I'll be right back. What I like most about both countries, I would take first the tolerance of the Netherlands, like the idea that everybody actually is welcome. That's super important, and it's something that you see in spades here. I mean, if you look up, you can see how much pride the city is taking in pride and its own history. Um, Beyond that, like politically, the social safety net and the public transit investments, I think, are phenomenal, and they are something that more places need. That said, I would also take the acceptance of the US and how anybody can actually find a place for themselves and find a way to be in the US. And I would take the sense of adventure and the sense of possibility that exists in the US, where you can, if you dream it, you can do it, at least in theory, in the US. And I don't think that's necessarily as true here, but I would love if it was. My conclusion is that trying to fit in is a little bit of a lost cause. I don't think I will ever truly be home anywhere. I don't think I'll ever truly fit anywhere. What I can do, though, is make home for myself and uh, build my own nest, as it were. And that the world is big and there's a whole lot of adventures to be had. And if I pin all my hopes on any one place, I will always be disappointed. So instead, what I can do is I can see what the world has to offer. I can travel, I can explore, treat every day like the adventure that it is, and make of the world and make of life what works for me, rather than trying to fit into somebody else's expectations that I will never meet.